This is me, CSMP's Interdisciplinary Support of Ethnic Studies. My name is Tuyen. I am with the California History Social Science Project. I work out of UC Davis. Yay! Aggies, yay! Every time I go this, I'm telling myself, no, that's a bird walk. Come on back, come on back. So thank you for being here today. I want to thank the California Language Teachers Association for having me. Liz, thank you. The California World Language Project, thank you for having me. Margaret. And Vicky is here somewhere. Vicky is late. I'm sorry, I outed you for being late. Vicky is also here and supporting me. So I want to say those thank yous. And for the first time in 15 years I've done this work, my family's here with me. They're here in the corner. So although Akio looks like she fits in with my family, she is not with my family. I'm sure she gravitated towards them. They're just like, you know, the cafeteria when you're like, who are my people? Like, oh, this lovely Asian family. She fits all right on in. My mom lives with us, so she's just like, oh, you're like, you knew, like this is where your people were gonna be. So thank you for filling for that spot for my mom. Before I start, I wanted to say the land acknowledgements. I heard there were beautiful land acknowledgements yesterday. It's a typical practice for any time I present, anytime I do a presentation in front of a large group. And this is only partial of it. I'm going to send us to a link to get to the rest of it. And I'd like to read it in its entirety, especially since it was created from the associated student body here. I'm sure I got the name of the group wrong, and apologies for those folks, no disrespect. So for their land acknowledgement, we ask you to join us in acknowledging the Chumash peoples, their elders, both past and present, as well as their future generations. We would like to take this opportunity for all of us to reflect on how the work we do here today in our search for knowledge, our opportunities to teach, and every day in our chosen fields affects these lands and the peoples of these lands that we work with and research to protect. We acknowledge that this university system was founded upon exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples, including those on whose lands this institution is located, the villages and unceded lands of the Chumash people. This UCSB administration has failed to faithfully and dutifully support the traditional custodians of these lands, Chumash people, and indigenous students through their continued support of Wana Kia. As we work together to prevent further damage to these lands and waters that support not only our livelihoods, recreation, lifestyles, research, and education, we remember that the Chumash peoples of this area have been separated from these lands, unable to maintain livelihoods as they should, unable to recreate traditionally, unable to maintain their traditional lifeways freely, and unable to have the same access to their lands that we are provided to do their own traditional research and educate their future generations. The Chumash people are comprised of the descendants of the indigenous peoples removed from their island of origin, the Limu, Santa Cruz, Aya, Pak, Wima, and Tucson, subjugated by 5 missions during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, from Malibu to Morro Bay and inland to Bakersfield. The villages upon which this university sits were a safe haven for maritime travelers, a place alive with trading, hospitality, and abundance, a place where knowledge of and from the surrounding areas far and wide was shared with all people of this place and its many visitors, a traditional place of sharing knowledge and education, a tradition this university has an obligation to remember. Many of the projects and research conducted by the university are within the traditional territory of the Chumash peoples and or affect other indigenous peoples in their territories, and in spite of all this, each tribe, council, clan, and band is working diligently to restore and continue their traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from this historical trauma. The damage that has been done and continues to be done by not sharing the true history and legacy in this place and others, and by the exploitation of the natural cultural resources of these areas, can never be erased. There's no mitigation or research project that can make their communities whole again, but we can do better. As educators, friends, and allies, together we can acknowledge the mistakes and atrocities of the past and move forward in remembrance and relationship with the local Chumash peoples and their indigenous peoples to facilitate their process of healing by making sure that our processes here make room for the Chumash and indigenous voices to be heard, their traditional ecological knowledge of these territories to be listened to, and their peoples to be a part of the healing of these lands and waters as well as themselves. This acknowledgement, though brief and in no way complete, demonstrates a commitment by this institution and their educators to begin the process of creating a relationship with the local Chumash and indigenous communities and work to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. We come together today to acknowledge, stand up for, and give voice to the unceded lands and waters of the Chumash and all their peoples. So shout out to the student body that created that land acknowledgement. I'm sure they did it in partnership with the Chumash peoples. It is an honor to be here on Chumash land. Anytime I go anywhere where I present, I make sure that I do it at land acknowledgement, acknowledging the land that I stand on. I'm paid for my occupation, everything, me working at UC Davis, unceded lands of the Patwin. I'm mindful anytime I go to a new place that I acknowledge the land and the historical caretakers of that land. And so anywhere we go, it's a question that I often ask myself is like, what do I know about this place, of its land, and of its people? And when I say of its people, I'm thinking about the original caretakers and stewards of the land. And in this way, it helps us to identify our solidarity with movements for land back and repatriation of people to their land. And as a displaced person from Vietnam, this is sort of like integral to who I am. So I think the ethnic studies strand of folks have been reading my grandmother's hands. Yeah, shout out to, Rizma. And so I'd like to take a moment. I know we all come from all sorts of different places. It's always a harried experience to get to the right place at the right time. I know that I just caught Margaret like by chance to get here. I didn't know where I was supposed to park. My family's with me. You're running from breakfast and you're thinking about your whole day. So I would like to take this moment to ground ourselves, to be in this place. So if you will with me, just if you're comfortable, to close your eyes, have your feet grounded, centered to the ground. And also in recognition of the students who are not here with us, or the students who feel invisible in our classrooms, I would like for you to consider, as I walk us through this exercise of deep breathing, to consider you and your early childhood self in K-12. So think about your K-12 person, any age, kindergarten, like some really good moments and maybe some hardships, but think about yourself as that student, and we're gonna go through some deep breathing. This is some exercises that's available in my grandmother's hands. It's a way to ground ourselves and think about like who we want to be in relation with and the trauma that we carry within ourselves. And so I want to like sort of think about unearthing that young person in us as we go through this presentation, as you sit here and be in relation with me and we go through my presentation. So if you're comfortable, your eyes closed, your feet on the ground, take a deep breath in, and we're going to hold it for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. We're going to do this 2 more times. Take a deep breath in. Hold it for 4 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Release. Taking a deep breath in. Release. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, well, as you keep your eyes closed, I wanted you to think about your childhood self and a time that you felt like you belonged. Just pick one moment that you felt like you really belonged. And I want you to do a body check as you're thinking about like the time that you felt like you belonged. Where does that feeling of belonging rest in your body? Is it in the hands? Was it doing something with someone? Is it in your whole body, playing on the playground? Is it a moment in your head? Is it a moment in your heart? Where is that feeling of belonging rest in your body? So I want you to take that feeling, and I want you to give that feeling a virtual hug and say, I'll check in on you later, but you just want to give it a virtual hug to say, that was a really good feeling of belonging. And then I'm going to count to 5, and we're going to come back to this space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Welcome back. It's a good feeling, isn't it, of belonging? And if you struggled with figuring out, if folks are comfortable with your vulnerability, did anyone struggle to find a moment of where they felt like they belonged? Like it took them a little bit? Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, there's a couple of us, yes. It would take me a little bit to think about that too, like the time of belonging. I think about my friends, but belonging is a very, very deep and personal thing. But if we don't feel like we belong, how can we possibly learn? If we feel invisible, how can we possibly learn? So I wanted to tap in that feeling because this is what I want to like focus on, and also it is the thread that I would like you to consider as you go through your day today. Okay, so the goals of Equity, Justice, and Sustainability Seminar is to develop greater resilience, happiness, and peace of mind with high impact from the form of meditation. I love this. If you go to a history project function, we will never ever have a goal like this. You will see goals, you will see content. So I feel like I'm in the right place. I'm ready for recruitment, Margaret. We don't do this stuff. Like, no, we can do justice and we can do equity and sustainability. But I'm just like, to me, it feels like a big warm hug when I think about resilience and happiness and peace of mind. This is what we want for our own students, and it starts with you first, right? Like you have to have it in order to have it with your own students. And so for me, in my time with you, is like I want to say that ethnic studies complements and supports and aligns with your goals. I'm hoping that you will see it resonate as I go through my presentation. So as earlier Margaret was saying, who am I? I'm the person who's helping to lead this effort. For folks who are not in the know, ethnic studies is now our high school graduation requirement. So, yay! And it was made possible by the Assembly Bill 101. So in 2029, 2030, students need to graduate with at least one semester of ethnic studies. And then the California state legislator gave the $2 million to the University of California, the subject matter projects to prepare and support teachers to get ready for delivering ethnic studies, because there is no credentialing in ethnic studies. So it wasn't like they created a law, we're gonna roll this out, but there is no credentialing. So who's going to be teaching it? And so the subject matter projects, we're giving money to basically scale up teachers who are currently in the classroom to teach ethnic studies. Some places are already teaching ethnic studies and other places are not. And so some of the job will rest on the subject matter projects to prepare teachers to teach ethnic studies. So this is the work that I'm doing, and some of that work you'll see is in schools, developing content, increasing content knowledge for teachers, there's curriculum development. There are big interdisciplinary projects that are happening across the state right now. There's a Central American Studies project happening, there's a digital oral history, there's counter mapping, which is really exciting. It's taking a map and deciding what are the cultural spaces that are important to the people there, not just the things of places of business, but also reclaiming those places of business. Like, for example, in Elk Grove, all the senior Asian men like to hang out at the McDonald's off of Highway 99, and that's where you need to go. So if you're from the ages of 75 to 90, Your children are going to drop you off at that McDonald's and you're going to hang out there for 3 hours on that one cup of coffee. You all know the place, right? There's a place in your community where like the seniors, there's a place, right? That's what counter mapping is reclaiming those places of community. And so that's what's happening with counter mapping and like empowering students to do that for themselves. Where are the places they feel like they belong, and what are the cultural sort of institutions and wealth that they bring to those spaces in their own communities. It might be the park, it might be the mall, all sorts of places. Hopefully it's not someone's individual house, but that might happen too. And then, and you see here critical literacies. So those are some of the projects that are happening across the state. Okay, so going back to the grounding exercise of thinking through and breathing through good and bad experiences, what Riesma calls clean pain and dirty pain. The clean pain is what we talked about. Pain is what we talked about earlier. You know, that sense of belonging. The dirty pain is the stuff of not belonging, and what you do with those feelings, right? If you keep them bottled up, they become something, and that something could be volatile, or it could be something that could be really self-damaging to yourself. And so, I would like to take a pause on that and think about right now, which is like thinking about your early childhood. Any of these experiences. Was any of this part of your early experience in school? That your life experience was reflected in the curriculum, that you learned the history of the people who looked like you learned of their contributions, you were encouraged to speak your native language, you learned you had cultural wealth, you were taught how to be a change maker. And especially when you learned the history about your people and you learned their contributions. I learned about Vietnamese people through the Vietnam War. And there was nothing about their contributions at all. They were people to be bombed on. So that was not a very positive experience. I understood some part of the history, but that wasn't the sort of experience I'm talking about, contributions, right? So I want you to think about that, take a moment, and I want you to consider it, not in meditation form, but in writing, and we're gonna do it in paper, creatively. If it's yes to this, I want you to think about like how that felt. If no, I want you to reimagine what it would have felt like if you had any of these experiences. And so I want you to take on to any of these check marks I have here, whether the feeling that had, or if you didn't have it, pick one that you think that would have helped you to reimagine a different schooling experience. There are blank pieces of paper on your tables. I would like you to draw out sort of your reflection of that experience. So whether it was positive or not positive, if it was positive, draw a picture of what that felt like. If it wasn't positive, I want you to reimagine what it would have felt like. So take a piece of paper and be as creative as you want. I'm going to give it 3 minutes. The reason why I had you do this exercise is when our students aren't checked in with us, they escape somewhere in their mind. When our students aren't with us, they escape somewhere in their minds. And they go to this. They're reimagining schooling right as you are teaching them. You might be doing that yourself right now. But when we feel like we don't feel connected, we don't belong, this doesn't resonate with us, like that we're not in relation with the person who's in front of us, that we feel like our schooling matters to us, we escape to somewhere where it's better. And in your mind, better looks like something. And so I wanted you to think about like, what is that something for yourself so that you can imagine what your students are thinking about. So now I would like you to take like maybe a minute or two with your table mates to talk about like what reimagination, or if you were blessed to have the experience of really feeling like you had a great educational experience that treated you like a whole being, then I want you to share that as well. So at your tables, maybe talk for 2 minutes with a table partner, share your drawing, or talk about like, what does it mean to daydream with your students about being seen in the classroom? I'm going to give you 30 seconds to finish your thoughts. All right, so I'm going to restart. I think I started the exercise with you thinking about your early childhood person, and then now I'm transitioning to you as an adult, and you're a teacher. And what I believe for most teachers that go into the profession is whether they really had someone really terrific and inspiring, that one educator that felt like that was amazing, and then you wanted to be just like them. Or like me, you had Mr. Fody in 5th grade, and he told the whole class that Chinese people were like the Eskimos, they eat cats. And on that day, a historian was born, because I said, no, sir, that is not true. Absolutely not, and you are trash. And so much so that I did not go to his retirement party that year. I was like, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm not participating. I knew that in 5th grade. I was like, no, that man is wrong, and I do not like him, and I don't trust him. So, you as an educator, you have 2 experiences. Most educators have 1 of 2 experiences. The person that you want to emulate, and the person to your dying deathbed, you're going to prove them wrong, you know? So there you go, Mr. Fody, I'm here. And so I would like to say that, yay. So I would like to say that in ethnic studies, we do this every day, all day, every day, until you're tired of it, and then we're going to do it some more. This is ethnic studies. Ethnic studies, like you value, and when you don't value, you're going to fight back when you don't value. This is what's happening. This is how we're going to make change. So what is ethnic studies? We're going to go to I'm just going to read this to you from the UC Berkeley website. Ethnic studies is the critical and interdisciplinary study of race, ethnicity, and indigeneity, with a focus on the experiences and perspectives of people of color within and beyond the United States. Since the emergence of the ethnic studies as an academic field in the late 1960s, scholars have analyzed the ways in which race and racism has been and continue to be powerful social, cultural, and political forces, and their connections to other axes of stratification, including gender, class, sexuality, and legal status. So what does that mean, and how did it come about? So the origins are, it's the 1960s. Everything is a burning hellfire, right? You have the Vietnam War. Students are getting drafted. Students feel like they don't have a voice on campus. There's the civil rights movement happening along. We're still fighting segregation. 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, we said that the separate but equal is trash. That's dumb. I don't know why we kept it out for so long. We're still fighting that from 54 and on. In the 60s, there's Black liberation, Black Panthers, there's the American Indians are taking over and saying, we didn't disappear, and we didn't disappear like you said we did. We still exist. We've been existing. You're welcome. Like, you took it all, you're welcome, right? And Chicano, Asian American movement, labor movement, and anti-war, pro-peace movements. Out of that experience, students at college campuses is like, wait a minute, how does everything that's happening in the world matter to me, and how does it resonate with like my lived experiences? Oh, I identify with all those people fighting for third world liberation, all the places that are being decolonized in Africa, in Southeast Asia, that are saying no to imperialism and decolonizing those states. The students in the United States said, wait a minute, there is some decolonization that needs to happen within our education system, specifically at our college campuses. So students at UC Berkeley and at San Francisco State University fought for what they felt was marginalization of themselves on campus, unrepresented faculty and staff on campus, and for a larger say in campus politics. And so for 5 months, or 6, depending on who's telling the story, the student activism generated the first College of Ethnic Studies in '69 at San Francisco State University and at UC Berkeley after the longest protracted student activism was at San Francisco, but at Berkeley was incredibly violent. The campus police were called in, the National Guard was called in, they tear gassed them, they sicked the dogs on them, they did everything violent they could possibly, and still they went out for the first ethnic studies department and program in 1969 that brought about all the stuff that we're talking about, all those check marks. Like, what is so dangerous about all those check marks about feeling seen and heard, right? And so that happened in the 1968 and 9. So what is it that the campus and the institution was so opposed to? And what was it that the students, what were they were fighting for? Now, I love a movement that has receipts, and they just read Dr. Helen Bedism for the filth that she was. I need, these are the demands that they had, right? So the demands were like, we need representation, stop, we need larger enrollment, we need academic integrity, please bring back the professors that supported our movement, because the university let go of staff and faculty that supported the students. But one of the things that they said was that in the financial aid office, there's one particular person who does not support us, and she needs to go. That doctor, this is one of their demands, that Dr. Helen Bedism be replaced from the position of financial aid officer, and that a black person be hired to direct it, and that third world people have the power to determine how it will be administered. Why? The explanation is, during the year 1967 to 1968, 80% of the financial aid was allocated to white, largely middle-class students. Many third world students were turned away by the financial aid office, while at the same time, over 50,000 were returned to the federal government for the lack of qualified applicants. Dr. Bedism must be replaced with a person more responsible to the needs of the third world and other poor students. That's why I want my financial aid money to be like released, y'all. I'm still paying for my student loans. Why do we still have student loans? Okay? I need the federal government to take my student loans from me because of this nonsense, right? Like, this is not okay. And thankfully, students in 1968 said it's not okay, and they fought for this. And they fought it from one university, and then they fought it for the rest of us, because it led to a whole wave of change. So, since the 1960s, there's also been a fight, not surprisingly, for the Eurocentrism that's happening in our K-12 system, right? All of us, some of us, most of us probably didn't have all 5 of those things. Well, we felt like we were honored in our classrooms. And because of that, we have now ethnic studies as a graduation requirement. Part of what is happening in our classrooms is some of the guidance around it. There's an ethnic studies model curriculum, and these are the guiding principles and values of ethnic studies. I have that, it's on your table there, as well as, so you don't have to read this, and I'll give you all my slides after this, so you don't have to scribble insanely fast. And then also, I wanted to say that the 4 core curriculum within ethnic studies is African American, Chicana, and Latino, Latinx, Native American, Asian American, and Pacific Islander. Those are the foundational disciplines within ethnic studies. Those 4 historically marginalized groups are the foundation of ethnic studies. There are plenty of different minors within that area. But the main basis of an ethnic studies model curriculum, or the main basis of ethnic studies, is to do these thematic approaches, which is to study your identity, like to know your place and your positionality, the history and the movement, the systems of power and social movements and equity, to make connections to experiences of all students. All those things, if you do all those things, you're gonna hit all the check marks. So I wanted you to have that as a guidance, because this is what some of your peers are doing, who are part of the interdisciplinary work for ethnic studies that I'm helping to manage. And you have it listed there at the table. I made sure that there was enough for at least a pair of you. I want you to just take a look at them, and I want to think about, with a partner, we're just going to take about 3 minutes. I want you to identify like what you can get with. You and your practice, you and your discipline, teaching world languages. What are the alignments between ethnic studies and the work that you do? What are the things that like seems to make sense that already could happen? What are the threads? And that's what the Post-it notes are for. So if you want to add Post-it notes to it, I'm loving all the energy. Okay, so what does it look like in practice? Okay, I did all these big terms. You have all these agreements and values. So what does that look like in practice? Ethnic studies is a deeply theoretical, but also praxis pedagogical driven discipline. So these things here lead to a wide variety of pedagogy. So curriculum as counter-narrative and criticality, reclaiming cultural identities, intersectionality and multiplicity, community engagement, pedagogy that is culturally responsive and mediated, and students as intellectuals. Is really, really important that our students feel like, and they are nurtured to believe that they also come with cultural wealth, and that they themselves are imbued, or they also can create knowledge, right? That knowledge production that was primarily owned at the university by the teacher also is something that is inherently within them. And that's what we want to nurture. They themselves can produce knowledge, right? They're knowledge producers. And so one of the things, I'm going to just give you a quick example, and then I'm going to see you off on my way because I'm staring down 3 minutes left of my time. So one example is curriculum as counter-narrative. So I talked about Mr. Foti in 5th grade. That was 40 years ago. 2 years ago, my son who's here, he doesn't even know that I talk about his, I mine their schooling all the time for my presentations. And this is the first time that he's actually sitting here, so this is very meta. He's sitting here watching me talk about his schooling and saying like, they are trash. But we talk about them being trash all the time. So, but now he's seeing me do it in front of a larger audience. So curriculum is counter-narrative. This was just 2 years ago. I talked about Mr. Foti. Mr. Foti was 40 years ago, but this is 2 years ago in his own history class. So what we're trying to do is curriculum from the perspectives of people of color, like a structural analysis of racism and colonialism that works, oh, there's a typo there, that's going to kill me for a long time, that works towards dismantling multiple forms of oppression. So this example here, you'll see that my son in history, they have to learn the explorers, right? Quote unquote explorers, and who discovered everything, right? And so, and in this lesson, one day I'm at the kitchen table, and my son is singing this jingle, and he's like, oh, the jingle is, it was the germs, all the germs. That really did us in. Who thought we would lose our lands because we did not wash our hands? Oh. Yes! I was like, not in my house. No. It was too much for me. So we paused the dinner. So his teacher had a bright idea that they were going to like do this musical theater. That's never a good idea, but okay, unless you're in art class, but okay. And you feel really confident about your skills. But they did musical theater to the European explorers, and they had to sing this song. And in the song, they blamed the indigenous folks of losing the lands because they didn't wash their hands during a pandemic. Can you imagine? Even more so. So they're doing this, and I said, son, this is really, really problematic. So I broke it down to him, explained to him why it was problematic. If we had more time, I would bring him on the stage, and he would give you a master class on why it was problematic and what he did to rectify it, because I empowered him to rectify the situation with his teachers, and then he shared it with his peers as well. But curriculum is counter-narrative. We're constantly going to push back the narrative. When we get junk, we say, no, that's junk and that's trash. We're not going to continue doing that, right? And this, so that's part of ethnic studies. That's only one example of what happens in ethnic studies. My time is up, but my last thing I want to do, and my kids, if you could get up, I want to send you off with some affirmations. I'm going to send you off with this. So at your table, this is the process, but we don't have the time for the process. My kids are going to go ahead. They're going to go around and they're going to give you 3 cards each. They're yours to keep. At some point, I want you to pass them on, but hold on to them, keep reflecting upon them, but they're affirmations. I believe that we all are, if we embody So the mindset of teacher and education, we all have room to grow and can be lifelong learners. When we do, I think we just become better human beings. And so these affirmations they're all randomized, right? So my son is just passing them out. I don't know which cards you get, but I do believe there's something about the universe that speaks to you. So of the 3 cards, I want you to think about, like, if any of them make sense to you, hold on to them, and take it with you throughout the day, throughout the week, as a form of thinking about where are the places that you can grow to affirm of who you are, and potentially a conversation starter with the people who are in this room who also believe in equity, justice, and sustainability. And then my time is up. Thank you.